Today, we're going to unpack something that affects millions of people, but is so often just brushed off as being a worrier. We're talking about generalized anxiety disorder, or GAD. We're going to get into what's really going on inside the brain when worry just takes over, and more importantly, how we can actually retrain it for some real, lasting wellness.
So, let me ask you this. Have you ever had that feeling where there's just a motor running in the back of your mind? You know, that constant hum of anxiety that you just can't seem to switch off, even when, logically, there's nothing really to worry about. Well, that feeling, that's exactly what we're digging into today.
All right, here's our game plan. First, we'll define what GAD actually is. Then, we'll look at what it's like to live with it day to day. After that, we're going deep inside the anxious brain to see the mechanics of it all. Then, the hopeful part, how we can retrain the brain. And finally, we'll take a quick look at what's on the horizon.
So, let's get right into it. What is GAD, really? Because it's so important to understand that this isn't just the everyday stress or worry that we all feel from time to time. Nope, GAD is a very specific, diagnosable condition.
The clinical definition describes it as this intense, prolonged, and unreasonable concern about, well, little things, and this persistent feeling of being totally overwhelmed. You see, unlike a specific phobia, like, say, a fear of spiders, this anxiety is generalized. It's a free floater. It can latch on to pretty much anything and everything.
And you might be surprised at just how common this is. We're talking 6.8 million adults in the US alone. That's over 3% of the population. But here's the part that really gets me. Less than half of those people are actually getting treatment.
That number? It's huge. But let's move beyond the statistics for a second. What does it actually feel like to live with this day in and day out? Let's talk about the real, tangible impact.
You know, living with GAD isn't just some abstract mental state. It is a full-body experience. We're talking about feeling constantly restless, like you're always on edge, being physically exhausted all the time, finding it almost impossible to concentrate because your mind is just somewhere else. And on top of all that, you've got irritability, constant muscle tension, and of course, major problems with sleep. It is absolutely draining.
And you know, this quote from a patient in a case study just says it all. She described herself as a lifelong worrier and put it so simply. I'm exhausted, my muscles are tense, and I can't sleep. It's just such a perfect, heartbreaking summary of how this mental condition becomes this heavy physical burden. Okay, this is where things get really fascinating from a brain perspective. GAD literally changes how you perceive the world. It creates what scientists call an interpretive bias. What that means is in any situation that's even a little bit ambiguous, the brain automatically, instinctively jumps to the worst possible conclusion. A friend doesn't text back? They must be angry. A weird look from your boss? You're probably getting fired. It creates this vicious feedback loop of constant, unending worry.
So that begs the question, right? Why does the brain do this? What is actually going on under the hood to cause this bias? Well, the answer lies in the neuroscience of GAD, and it's really a story about two key parts of the brain that aren't quite talking to each other correctly.
At its core, it's really a communication breakdown. In the anxious brain, the wiring, the functional connection between the part that spots danger and the part that's supposed to calm things down, it's weak. The signal just isn't getting through properly.
Okay, so first you've got the amygdala. The best way to think about this is as your brain's smoke detector. Now, in someone with GAD, that smoke detector is incredibly oversensitive. It doesn't just go off when there's a real 5-alarm fire. Oh no, it's screaming its head off because you slightly overcooked a piece of toast.
And then you have the prefrontal cortex. This is the rational, logical part of your brain. It's the firefighter who's supposed to show up, look at the situation, and say, hey, everyone, calm down. It's just toast. We're totally fine. But in GAD, this part of the brain is underactive. The brakes just aren't working right. So you're left with this alarm that just keeps on blaring, with nothing to shut it off.
So you've got this overactive alarm and a set of faulty brakes. I know, it sounds pretty bleak, but here is the amazing, hopeful news. Our brains are not set in stone. They are plastic, they can change, and they can absolutely be retrained. So let's look at how that actually happens.
Two of the leading treatments here are cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, and a newer method called metacognitive therapy, or MCT. And they have this one absolutely crucial difference. See, CBT helps you challenge the content of your worries. It teaches you to ask, okay, is this scary thought actually true? But MCT takes it a level deeper. It doesn't focus on the thought itself, but on the process of worrying. It teaches you to take a step back and ask a totally different question. Why am I even engaging with this thought in the first place?
In this tiny shift in approach, it leads to a massive difference in results. A major study in 2018 put these two therapies head-to-head, and the findings were just stark. With CBT, 38% of patients recovered, which is good. But with metacognitive therapy, that number skyrocketed to 65%.
But hold on, it gets even better. This is the part that is just incredible. The researchers followed up with these same patients 9 years later. And the people who had done MCT, they still had those way higher recovery rates. So this wasn't just a short-term fix. The changes weren't just effective, they were lasting.
I mean, this kind of research is a total game changer. So, what does this all mean for the future of how we understand and treat anxiety? All right, so let's just quickly recap what we've covered. First, GAD is a real, common, and serious condition. It's not just worrying a lot. Second, it literally rewires the brain to see threats everywhere, driven by that overactive smoke detector, the amygdala, and weak brakes in the prefrontal cortex. And maybe most importantly, we now have proof that the brain can be retrained, with therapies like MCT showing amazing long-term success.
And that all brings us to this one final, really fascinating and hopeful question for the future. If we know how to effectively retrain the brain after GAD has already taken hold, what's to stop us from finding ways to strengthen those brain connections before it ever starts? Could we one day actually prevent this kind of anxiety before it even has a chance to begin? Just think about that.